Today we're going to be taking a look at how I installed this relay box and fuse box in this FJ Cruiser. So I think maybe the most easy to follow method of explaining this is going to be to kind of outline the major components, and then we'll kind of whittle down what links all these things together. So number one, we've got the battery, it's factory battery from the vehicle. We've got a relay box right here, which has a cover just off right now. And then under the driver's side kick panel over here, we've got another fuse box. So essentially the power comes from the battery, runs through an inline fuse, which is super important for wires coming directly off the battery. Then that runs into this relay box right here. You can see that the main power wire comes up and ties into this bus bar. Now we've got a bunch of different connections along the bus bar that run into the fuse spots in this relay box. And from the fuse spot, it runs to individual relays, which there are 5 of. But we can see that there are 6 spots for fuses. And what the 6th spot for a fuse does is it runs to the fuse box that's inside the cab. So again, power from the battery to the fuse to the relay, and then out the other side of the relay to whichever accessory that it's powering. And the way relays work is they're basically a remote controlled switch. So we use small amounts of power to let big amounts of power run through these. So there's a small amount of power that comes from a switch that we have inside the vehicle that kicks a little door, which makes a connection for a bigger amount of power to cross from the battery and go straight out to the accessory without having to run that large amount of power, large gauge wire and whatnot into the cab and back out. That gets expensive. It can be hard to find switches that can handle that much power. So that's basically why we use relays. So I'm set up for 5 different accessories here. Some of them are going to be lights. I'm not totally sure what I'm going to use all of them for yet, but I'm sure they will eventually be used. So that's the 5. Now number 6, which runs into the cab, utilizes one spot on this 6-wire weather pack connector. When I do connectors on vehicles, I like to use weather pack. Again, they require a special crimping tool. They generally don't come pre-wired, but I think it's well worth the effort to have a nice secure connection like this. But that's just a little side note. So if you look, there's a bunch of different colored wires here, and the wire that goes from the 6th fuse into the cab is the thick red one on the side here. That's the heaviest gauge wire that's in this little connector. Now what do all the rest of these wires do? These are basically pre-wired to each of these relay spots. So there's nothing going to these inside the cab right now, but all these wires run inside and will eventually be connected to a switch. So they all currently dead end basically. But once there is a switch installed, the switch will be flipped. Wire will come through these wires. That's what will kick the door inside the relay, sending power to the accessory. Hopefully this is making sense. So that's all pre-wired. I won't need to do any more wiring inside this box or run any more wires in and out of the cab. And speaking of which, I don't know if the light's going to pick it up, but there was a nice little rubber nub sticking off the plastic boot on the firewall here that I was able to just snip with some wire cutters And it was a nice hole to run these wires through, basically the perfect size for the amount of wires I had to run into the cabin. So again, to reiterate, battery, fuse, bus bar, fuse, relay, and accessory. Like I said, I don't have any accessories hooked up quite yet, but these are all just pre-wired wires that I have coming out the power side from the relay. And I've got all the ends of the wires capped with some adhesive lined heat shrink tubing right now, so we don't have to worry about the elements getting in and corroding the wire. Now it's kind of tough to see everything in here because we're so cramped, but the wires come in through this rubber boot right up here, and we can see them all just kind of coiled up right there for now. Like I said, they all dead end. There's no power to them or anything, so no worries about them, arcing or anything like that. So that thicker red wire that I showed on the connector comes in. That runs separate from these other wires at this point, and it comes into this other relay right here. Now what this does is I didn't want any of these accessories that I'm running to be able to run without the key on in the ignition, so that allows that to be possible. So that relay right there is powered by a key on only power source. So that works the same way. It's basically we've got another switch controlled by another switch. So we've got the thicker red wire coming in here, and then the way that I chose to tap this into the system for a key on source was in the factory fuse box up here. I ended up probing a few of these unused locations to find ones that had power only when the key was on, and we can see right here is where I ended up installing what they call an add a fuse, which basically tees off of an existing fuse location and sends power to wherever you want it to go. And in this case, being this relay up here. Now I hope this isn't getting too confusing, but we're almost done. So once power is allowed to come through this relay, when the key is on, it'll power all of these fuses in here. And like I said, most of these are just going to go to switches that are up on the dash. So power will come here, go to a fuse, or go through a fuse, come out a wire, go to the switch, and when the switch is turned on, the power will come out of the switch and travel through one of these colored wires on that connector we were looking at under the hood into its pre-wired location in the relay box. And then, that'll subsequently turn on whichever accessory the switch goes to. So now you say, Kip, man, what the heck, that's so confusing. Why would you do that? You over-engineered the crap out of that. But yeah, I probably did. And there are certainly simpler ways to go about it. You say, well, how much time do I have into this? I probably got 10 to 15 hours into building this system, if not closer to 20. I kind of took my time with it, really thought out how I wanted it to be laid out, and kind of built it over the course of a few months. So it was only a little bit of time here, a little bit of time there, but eventually it got done. So I could be way off on my estimate of time. You kind of round up, round down, whatever. But so for the average Joe, is that worth it? No, I don't think it is. For me, yes it is, because I have a little bit of OCD, I guess, when it comes to wiring. I cannot stand messy wires. I can stand pretty much everything else being a mess, but wiring, man, it drives me nuts. So what would I recommend for the average guy looking to install wires? You can get little wiring kits like this. This one is made by, looks like Oxbeam. I just happen to have it sitting around because I don't really use these things. So basically what this is it's a bunch of wires with a fuse, a relay, and a switch all in one. So it's basically a plug-and-play unit, as long as you don't need to extend any of these wires. So if you're just installing a light bar, a couple little lights or something like that, this will install in probably 15 minutes versus taking hours and hours to create a system like this. However, once you start putting a couple of these in, or even more, I just don't like the look of it. So that's why I did this, and I'm extremely happy with the way it turned out. So hopefully I didn't confuse the crap out of you. As usual, thanks for watching. If you liked it, please give it a like, and go ahead and subscribe if you're not already.